Welcome back. This is, I think, the fifth video of our study of Esther. And we just got through talking in the previous one a little bit about Cyrus in chapter 44 and 45 of Isaiah. Cyrus is mentioned by name, that he is going to be the one that brings Israel back home. Well, approximately 50 years into his reign, after the destruction of the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, about 52 years later, while Cyrus is king of Persia, he sends the people back home that want to go to rebuild the temple. Now, this is not the end of the 70 years. This is just 52 years after the destruction of the temple. So the 70 years is still looming out there. But he sends them back, and so they start going back to rebuild the temple. Now, you need to read the entire books of Ezra and Nehemiah to find out what problems were going on with rebuilding the temple. We have in that, as we had studied before, we have during that time when Ezra and Nehemiah were in the rebuilding stage of the temple, that there were a group of people that come in from northern Israel, Samaria. They were Samaritans. We found out that these people wanted to help rebuild the temple. The Jewish people did not want them to help whatsoever because they did not know God. They felt that they were enemies of God. And if you go back and look at 17th chapter of 2 Kings, I think it is, we have how that the Samaritans got there, and it tells what countries that they come from. And it tells that when the king come in, and when Babylon come in, or Assyria came in and conquered the northern kingdom, that they would take some of these people here and they would move them way off over here to another country, and then they'd take some people over here and they'd move them into Israel. Then they'd take some people way up here and they'd bring them back into Israel, take some Israelites and put them way down here and scatter them throughout the region, so that they would not have an identity. They couldn't mesh together there in northern Israel, in Samaria. But there were only 42,000 when Cyrus said, "You can go home now." Only 42,000 of them went back. There was over 1 million that stayed in Babylon. They'd been there for 50 some odd years. Hey, everything's okay. We've got plenty of water. We've got plenty of food. We've built a life for ourselves here. We've got our academies here. We want to stay right here. And so that's why there's a tremendous number of Jewish people that stayed up there. And of course, later throughout history, over the last 3,000, 4,000 years, they've scattered throughout the world. And so that's why Cyrus told them to go home, and they didn't go home. And of course, now we're into King Ahasuerus, and he's the next king. He takes over after Cyrus, and he gives them, he stops the building. Vashti, who is the queen that has been dethroned. Vashti was the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar is the one that destroyed them and destroyed Israel in the first place. She didn't like Israel. She didn't like the Jewish people. Ahasuerus didn't like Israel, but they're part of his people because he governed 129 provinces. Haman didn't like the Jewish people. Haman was a descendant of the Amalekites. He was a descendant of Agag. He absolutely hated the Jewish people. So you've got three people right there that don't like him at all. And so now we'll see what kind of murderous, scheming things that they can do to the Jewish people. In the next video, we'll start with Esther chapter 2.